Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for Glad You Asked. Teresa is on the way, and I see a few others that are here. All right, so for those who are here and who are participating, if you could just put a little note in the chat if you are ready to get started. Okay, all right, thank you. I had some feedback there. Okay, all right, so today we are going to talk about a few different topics, and we are going to open up the panel, if you will, for your questions and your discussion. So today we wanted to talk about a few things. So the first one is making sure that you all have a good understanding of dual and designated agency and when it applies to us in our real estate transactions. So just wanted to make sure that everyone is clear that when you have a buyer or a seller client that signs for the firm or with the firm, please understand that all agents, every agent of every location, that will be Burlington, Hillsborough, and Mebane, that all agents are now sub-agents of your client. We are working together to meet the firm's clients' needs. And so we are working together for every single person that signs an agency agreement with our firm. So if you have a listing agreement out in Burlington, and one of the agents in the Hillsborough office has a buyer, if they want to show that property that's listed with the Burlington agent with our firm, you would be under dual agency. And so it's important to understand that our firm does practice both dual and designated agency. And so you would need to get that permission in writing if you don't have it already in your agency agreements, and make sure that you operate according to which role you're playing, either dual or designated agency. Just a quick reminder of the difference between the two. If you are in designated agency, then you can continue to represent your client almost as if it were exclusive representation. But when you're in dual agency, it does require you to step back and to not advocate or negotiate or give one party any benefit over the other. Okay, so just a reminder here that does arise and it exists if you have any clients from any of the locations. Okay, so making sure that you all understand, as a market center, we are one firm with 3 different locations that we work out of. All right, so that was the first topic. Any questions about that before we move on to topic number 2? Hi, Teresa. Welcome, welcome. Do you have anything you'd like to add to that first topic? About
what was the, hold on.
It was the dual and designated agency.
I'm pretty sure you covered it fairly thoroughly. I'm sure you did. Yeah, we're all one big market center.
Yep.
So we are all dual agents. So if we have, listings in Burlington, but a Hillsborough agent brings the client, it's dual agency. So I'm sure you covered it. So thank you. I'm good with whatever you said.
All right, sounds good. All right. Hey, Mike, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Hello, everyone.
Hey.
How are you today?
Hi there.
Good. All right. Okay, so topic number 2. So now that we're clear on number 1, and we'll have to make sure that this video is available because that could be very useful information for more of our agents. Topic number 2 that I wanted to talk about today, agent etiquette. Agent etiquette and professional respect. So I wanted to give you all a scenario that has happened in a transaction of mine recently, and to find out what you all are doing or finding or experiencing, especially in this very challenging market that we are in for buyers. Okay, so when it comes to agent etiquette and how do you communicate with other agents in this particular market, is it expected of a listing agent to acknowledge receipt of an offer? What do you guys think about that? Okay, I see a nod there. It's at least expected to acknowledge that you've received it, right? Is it legally required to acknowledge that? Good question, right?
Good question. Yep.
All right. So that's what we want to talk about here. So talking about what is required versus what is just a good practice or proper etiquette or just decency and respect for our profession and for other agents. Okay. So just to let you know, there is actually not any kind of rule, commission rule or law that requires you to even acknowledge that you've received the offer. But remember that there is a rule that you must present all of them. Okay. And so how you actually manage that, that's where the professional courtesy and etiquette comes into play. So while there's not a technical rule or law saying that you must, it is a good practice and it is simple, respect to acknowledge at least the receipt of an offer, even in a scenario where you're receiving many and multiples of them. All right. So that was one of the topics we wanted to talk about. What do you owe and what level of professional courtesy or etiquette should you offer there? How far do you have to go? Do you have to acknowledge receipt? Do you have to give, a play-by-play of where we are in the decision process? Do you have to notify everyone once the seller has made a decision? What do you do and how do you handle that scenario, especially in the case of multiple offers? So what do you think?
Yeah, I'm curious to hear because I know we all have our individual businesses and we run our business based on how we run our own businesses, right? So I'm curious to hear what you lovely agents do when you're in, multiple offer situations. Do you respond back to all buyer agents that presented offers? How do you handle that? Do you use MLS as a blanket, announcement out to everybody? What do you all do?
I reach out to each individual agent via email, at least, if not a phone call. But I like to put it in writing, so I put it in an email, and it's an individual email. It's not even a copied email. It's here's where we are. And if it is a multiple offer situation and one of the offers stands out, say they're in second place, then I will even suggest that they or ask if they would be interested in being a backup.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a great idea too. So even give second place an offer, an opportunity to potentially be backup if they didn't win the offer.
Correct.
All right. And so when you say that you respond individually to each one, is it just to confirm that you've received the offer? Do you give feedback at the end of the process? What kind of individual response are you talking about?
Yeah, I'll be honest. I do better after when I need to notify them of an accepted offer. I do better with that than actually letting them know that I've received it.
Okay.
I'm trying to do better. I know we don't try, right? But I'm working on being better at acknowledging receipt as soon as I get it. This last go round, when I had multiple offers, I did respond to each one individually and said, got your offer, I'll get it presented. So, but yeah, and I definitely do reach out to each one individually via email once we have an accepted offer, to let them know that, unfortunately yours was not accepted. And if it's a second place type thing, I'd offer, or at least ask if they want to be a backup.
Okay.
I always take a backup. I want to go in as a backup. The way things are going now, you never know what's going to happen.
Well, that's true. That is true. And now, there are probably multiple backup offers if you did put the offer or the opportunity out there, So Mike, thank you for sharing what you do and your thoughts about how you address the actual agents that have gone through the effort of showing the property and the time of typing up and submitting these offers, and at the very least acknowledging either that you've received them or that you've presented and they were or were not selected. So let me ask you, as looking at this from the buyer side of things, if you were a buyer's agent, which would you rather receive? If you could only get one, let's say the listing agent gets 50 offers and they can't respond to everybody individually. Would you rather have the acknowledgement that your offer was received, or the after the fact that your offer was not selected? Which would you rather have in that scenario?
I think if I could have one, I'd have the after the fact.
The after the fact, okay. Thank you for chiming in there, Chris. We appreciate it.
I would like to know that my offer was received, just so that I know where I am in that it was received and I'm a part of the process.
Okay, so acknowledgement that it did get received, so it's at least being considered.
Mm-hmm.
You'd rather have that than some sort of notice after the fact. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Cynthia.
I like to know that it's been received, because with technology, anything can happen. Mm-hmm. So if I know it's received, I know that at least it got to the listing agent.
Okay.
It would be great to have both, but if you can only have one, we don't need to worry about after the fact if it never got received in the first place.
Okay. So that's a good thought too.
But I believe that if I got after the fact notification, that I know it was received. So that's why I went that way.
Oh yeah. It's a good argument.
Received, if you may, my thoughts are, and I know there's not a right answer, but my thoughts are, if you wait till after the fact and it wasn't received, you may have had the best offer, but nobody looked at it or had it to present because of one little typo or whatever.
Well, thank you all for your thoughts and preferences. We really appreciate the feedback here. The thought being that either way, whether you get it as received or you get the after the fact, the acknowledgement that the offer was in fact received, considered, addressed in some way, that acknowledgement is what we're after and what we're talking about here, as opposed to never receiving any communication at all, which is what happens to some agents. And it can be very frustrating when you're trying to explain to your buyers and they ask, well, was it at least presented? You really can't say for sure if you never got any type of acknowledgement. So whether you do it, whether you make it a practice to acknowledge that at least it's been received, which is what I try to do in my own personal practice, at least that first acknowledgement. And then I usually try to do both and follow up with a thank you for your offer. A decision has been made. But in the event that you can't do both, I personally at least do the acknowledgement, the received offer acknowledgement. But again, one way or the other, the idea here is to encourage you all to have that personal touch or that professional respect for these agents that are getting these offers into you, to whether it's the beginning or the end, to acknowledge that their offer was received at some point. Now, with that being said, there's no law saying you must. So again, this is professional courtesy and etiquette. Mike.
One more comment. I think I kind of expect, and I want to deliver what I expect.
Mm-hmm.
So if I expect to hear that it's been received, and at the end, I want to be able to give that type of service to our fellow agents as well.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you for that. Teresa, any thoughts?
Well, I was going to ask a question in there. And thank you
Okay.
all so much for sharing how you do business and your expectation. It's really good to hear that we have some prudent agents who like to follow up with their clients and inspect what they inspect. I love that. My question is this: what if one of those offers is verbal and you're the listing agent? What do you do with that verbal offer? So in all of this, responding back to these buyers and things, so you have, I don't know, 6, 7 written offers, and then lo and behold, an agent didn't have time to write it up because your deadline was 5 o'clock and it's 4:55. And so they just left the house and call you and say, oh, my buyer wants to make an offer. Here are the terms. It's not written. What do we do in that case?
But by the law. Law says present all, right?
Okay. All right.
Now, you don't have anything till it's in writing and signed by all. So, it's got to be in writing to be enforced.
Mm-hmm.
So,
There we go. So still got to present it is what you're saying, Mike. Still got to present that to the seller. Okay. All right.
I
Very
have actually received them via text. So and it was because of that situation. They had left the property just minutes before. So they shoot me a quick text with some of the details. Now,
Okay.
I make it clear to my seller when I present that we don't have all the details.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll have to we can make a better decision once we see it in writing and get all of the details, but it's got to be presented. So
Got to be presented. Okay. All right. Very good. All right. Excellent.
Absolutely. All right. And one more follow-up question to that line of thought before we move forward. What do you all do when it comes to potentially multiple offers and deadlines? Do you give deadlines? Do you just see what happens? Do you address them as they come? What do you all think about how to handle, especially in this particular market that we're in here, the onslaught of showings and a cutoff point or not? What are you all doing with that?
Good question. Does it vary? I'm curious for you listing agents out here, or does it vary depending on the property or the client? Do you do this? Do you make it a practice of doing the same thing and being consistent with every client, every seller, or do you take it on a case-by-case basis?
okay, so what I do, and I feel like this is the Mike answer show. I don't know, but anyway.
We'll take it, Mike.
What I do is before, of course, you have to have their permission to disclose that we have multiple offers.
Okay.
So I have that conversation at the time I list the property, first of all.
Okay. Good point, Mike. Good point.
And then once I get that approval, it depends on how they want that handled. And so it does vary from seller to seller how I handle that. Some don't want me to tell them that, the buyer's agents, that we have offers at all. Mm-hmm. Others say, yeah, let's drive the price up. Let's tell them all that and I give them the options of the pros and cons of doing it.
Great to be with you, Dan, as always.
Thank you, sir. Governor, you've led the way on coronavirus sanity the entire time I lived down here.
Someone is off of mute and we hear the news.
What do you plan on doing about these new masks?
I think that would be Melanie.
Is that Melanie?
Yeah.
Is there any potential that we can have these mandates banned?
Thank you, Melanie.
You. All right.
So anyway, it varies between sellers. But as soon as they give me permission, I let all the agents know that have shown the property, not just the ones that have given offers, that there is a deadline and whatever that deadline may be. And I do put a deadline on it. And I also tell my seller that they don't have to wait till the deadline. If they get an offer that they feel like they want to take, they're more than welcome to do that at any time before the deadline.
Mhm. Okay. Very good. Thank you for sharing that, Mike. So it sounds like Mike goes client by client. So take it on an individual basis. Anybody else care to share their business practice of having a offer deadline, or take them as they come, or review as they come?
I haven't had any actual transactions, but I guess pretty much consistent with what Mike said. It would depend on the client and their preference is the way that I would handle it. And because it could vary, as to, how they want me to handle it. So I don't actually have a transaction experience to refer to, but that would be my idea.
Mhm. And that makes sense. You definitely have to follow your client's lawful instruction, and you even have to have their permission. There are some clients who feel like the disclosure of multiple offers would turn some people away that they otherwise might do business with. And then there's others who are willing to take that risk and try to get as much as they can out of the transaction. What I have found in my own transactions is that agents seem to expect that there will be an offer deadline, and they're really surprised if you choose not to do it that way. And so, it's important for you to educate your clients and us educating our agents that there's no set rule and it doesn't have to have a deadline. And that each individual seller / agent or firm can practice when it comes to that, however the individual client requests or prefers.
So Stephanie,
yes.
a quick question on that permission. Are we talking about in writing, or is it something just verbal with our clients?
Oh, Chris, thank you for asking that question. I tell you, I always teach all of my students, make sure everything is in writing. You could certainly have a verbal conversation and then follow up by email or text or some sort of form of writing to make sure that you came to a meeting of the minds and that there was not a misunderstanding. So I always recommend, just for covering everyone's interest and concern, to make sure that it does make it to writing. Now, there doesn't have to be a specific form for it, but just make sure that you follow up in writing to make sure that you have an agreement.
So I've got a question.
Yes, sir.
If, as a buyer agent, I call the listing agent and say, hey, do you have any offers on the table?
Mm-hmm.
What is, or if I get that call from a buyer agent, I haven't talked to my seller yet, or we haven't made a decision yet whether we were going to tell them about multiple offers or not. Let's say I do have an offer on the table. What am I allowed to say?
Mike, that is a fantastic question. Teresa, you look like you're going to answer. Do you want to start?
No, I was just saying the same thing. It's a great question.
Yes.
And if you don't know, you need to find out, right?
Right.
I can't answer that at this point. It would be my answer or response to the buyer.
Mm-hmm.
That's something my seller and I have not discussed. I'll get back with you, or something to that effect, because you really do need the permission of your seller to even be able to discuss that.
Yeah.
So, and here's the thing, suppose we did tell that there was an offer on the table and we then subsequently go to the seller and the seller didn't want us to share that.
Right.
So
you do have to have that permission before you can disclose. Mike, one of my favorite answers, it happens all the time. Agents, I think, are just programmed to ask that question, And so one of my favorite answers to that question, are there any offers? One of my favorite answers to that is, this is a really busy market. I suggest if you'd like to get one in, that you make it as soon as possible.
Mhm.
And just skirt all the way around, don't worry about what everybody else is doing. If you want a chance at this property, get yours in, until I can get to the seller and ask the question of if they'd like to address it or not. So deflect a little bit, because, even though they know the rules and they know you can't disclose it unless the seller's given permission, they don't know if the seller has given that permission or not. So be prepared for that question, and be prepared to politely non-answer, and that's fine.
Yeah, and some agents don't know that they have a license, but maybe they didn't pay attention to that piece of class. But some don't know that we're not supposed to share that information without our seller's permission.
That's a whole nother topic.
Right.
And what I say is, I'm not at liberty to disclose that at this point. That's normally my
Good.
just normal answer.
Mhm.
What I do teach when I teach the negotiating the deal Ignite class,
Mhm.
I teach in that as a buyer agent, ask any question you want. Okay.
Away.
There are some agents that will tell you everything.
Yeah.
Or way too much anyway, right?
Yeah.
It's your duty as a buyer agent to ask. And I just had to throw that in.
I like how you think, Mike.
Thank you, Mike. Even though that feels sort of like trapping that chatty agent a little bit, but it's true. You can ask, because you don't know what has or has not been permitted to be disclosed. And so keeping that in mind, it's important for you all to know what you can and can't disclose, and properly protect your client's information. Lorraine.
As a buyer's agent, when I'm asked by potential buyers, are there any other offers on the table? I say, well, I don't know that as a buyer's agent. I would have to ask the listing agent. However, the listing agent doesn't know what potential buyers are out there thinking about the property and making preparations to submit an offer. So even if there are none on the table at this point, there could be one. So if you really want this property, we need to go ahead and think about submitting an offer.
Lorraine, thank you so much for sharing that. That's great. Even as a buyer's agent, how do you handle it when you're asked that question about competition and other buyers?
The seller doesn't know till it gets there.
Right.
I like
You're
that.
exactly right. That's excellent. Any other thoughts or questions to share on that particular topic? All right. So then it's about 1:30, so we're about halfway there. So do you want to, Teresa, open up the floor, or do you want to talk about scenario number 3?
Let's see if there are any burning questions, issues, or situations, and we'll take it from there.
That sounds good. All right. So we open the floor to you all. Thank you for coming. Please ask your questions.
No questions.
There's no question. We're really good if there's no questions. I just have to say that.
Something. No questions. Anybody have any scenarios, or even if it's not a question, want to share situation? Well, if no one has, I have a piece of paper somewhere around here. There it goes. Hang on. I want to know what you all think about this. I believe it was last week. I was hoping the agent who brought this situation to me was going to be on, but since they were not, I wanted to just put it out there for us to discuss and consider if it ever happens to us. Well, this agent took a listing, And forgive me, I don't remember the exact number. So I want to say the property was listed at 255. And they received an offer for 255 and some other good things, due diligence and earnest money and all of that. Well, lo and behold, after the seller received the offer, the seller decided they wanted more and did not want to sell for 255, which was in the listing agreement. How do you handle situations like that? What do you do? We listed at 255, offer at 255. No, I want 300 is what they said. What do you do?
I would call my bank. I would call my bank.
Good answer, Chris. Good answer.
That is a good answer.
Yeah, right?
Not the answer I was looking for, but
No, I'm just glad you didn't say I'm going to call my coach.
right.
Well, he was next in line if I couldn't get her.
Can't get the big, I'm going to my coach. I like it. I love it. What do you do? And here's the thing. We're not looking for right or wrong answers. We're just wanting to discuss the scenario because you never know. We could be faced with that very thing. So just thinking it out, what should we do?
So I've always been told you can't make a seller sell.
Okay.
However, you've got a listing agreement. I'm not sure what the answer is. I'm just kind of thinking out loud.
Yeah.
You have a listing agreement that says if you bring a ready, willing, and able buyer, that they owe you compensation for that, right?
Mm-hmm. That's what it says.
And if it's a cash buyer and they offer you what you're asking, to me, that's ready, willing, and able.
Okay.
Now, if there's financing involved, that's another situation.
Okay.
In my opinion, or my thoughts anyway.
Okay.
But that good question, actually. So what happened?
Not a good scenario, though, is it?
No,
That agent did not want to be in that situation.
I bet not.
I'm looking in the chat here. I see Mary says there is nothing you can do. All right, so produce a buyer at 255, seller gets it and says, nope, I want 300. And I guess that goes back to this market. This is the market that we're in and the expectations of sellers thinking that they're going to get over list price. But the fact of the matter is, did we explain the listing agreement well to let them know, hey, you signed, you agreed at this price? And going back to what Mike said about the language in that listing agreement, producing a ready, willing, and able buyer, and then owing a commission because of that, what do you do? What would your conversation be with that seller? Oh, take the dang offer? I mean, what do you say? Can we say that? We can't say that, can we? That goes back to etiquette, right, Tiffany, that you were discussing earlier.
Now that etiquette earlier was just between agents, like how you treat your clients. That's up to you. No, I'm kidding. Okay, so but although I can imagine there's some people that probably want to bang their client upside the head and knock a little sense into them.
Okay.
But so a couple of things I would mention or bring up in this scenario here. First of all, making sure, this one has to be just in the forefront of your mind at all times. You remember there's no discrimination allowed and such. So making sure that the seller is not accepting this full price offer because of any discriminatory reason. So make sure there's nothing that's been stated, or if the last name happens to have a cultural sound to it, or, something of that effect, make sure that you don't suspect that there's discrimination that's stopping that seller from accepting it. But if it is in fact that they just want more, that greedy bug has really bitten a lot of sellers in this market, because they want to see, well, what can I get for it? And why settle for a list price if people are overbidding right now? It's really important for you to have a conversation and educate them on what happens. That you can't force them to sell. They do not have to accept the offer. But at that point, if your listing agreement had a price on it and in other terms acceptable, if the seller was willing to accept even financing terms, and an offer came that met those terms, you have earned your compensation. If the seller still wants to play the game or play ball and see what else they can get, make sure that they understand that that is with the expectation that your compensation is now earned. It is due and it is payable. If they want to keep playing the market, by all means, let them do that, as long as they're very clear that if they mess around and lose their offer because they're trying to be greedy and that buyer walks, that they still owe you for your work, for the duty that you perform to bring that ready, willing, and able buyer. So this has a lot to do with education, making sure that they understand what they're signing and what they're agreeing to, even from the listing agreement. Forget about the contract and all the stuff that they are bound to in that one, but also making sure that they know what they are agreeing to when they list a property and what the expectation is and when your compensation is earned. Okay.
So Tiffany, when I made the statement about the financing being involved, does that not make it a different scenario about being able to go after that commission?
It doesn't. If the seller in the listing agreement was willing to accept certain financing terms, and that's what came in the offer, then you can go after it even then. That's what I just wanted to add to that. It doesn't have to just be cash. If they were willing to accept financing as a part of their listing agreement, then that is an acceptable offer that your compensation would be due and payable.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So
I learned
Tiffany,
something today. Look at that.
Yeah.
so Tiffany, Stacy had put in the chat to let them know that the commission will be renegotiated. So my question is, you mentioned that they will owe you for that commission because you brought them that willing buyer. So now that would end that contract. So they would have to renegotiate a new contract with you.
Very good question. Okay, so I just saw Stacy's comment too, Chris. Thanks for bringing that up. So this is a really good scenario here. How do you handle that? Do you renegotiate commission? What do you do at this point if that seller wishes to continue, because you do have to follow their lawful instructions, right? So how do you weigh and juggle all of that? How would you handle it if this was in fact your transaction right now? And so that's what Teresa, can I ask, how did you all handle that one before we go into suggestions and answers on that?
Yeah, so just that, what we did, what we discussed is go back to that seller and let that seller know that a ready, willing, and able buyer was produced, and that understand, Mr. or Miss Seller, that based on the listing agreement that you signed and agreed to. Now, hopefully it was explained in the very beginning, but regardless, they had the opportunity to read it and review it before signing. So tell them that the commission is due because you've done your job. You've done what that listing agreement said. And once they did that, the seller piped down and actually says, okay, I would like more. I think they actually wanted to go back and change the list price and push the list price up some. So I think that was the last that I heard of it. I haven't heard at this point what actually finally transpired, but the seller wanted to up the list price. I saw Melissa's hand.
Yeah, so if I was a seller and I didn't agree to it, you can always go back to the terms and say there's not enough due diligence, right?
Yep.
So you've got due diligence and earnest money that you can still battle with as a seller to reject anything out there.
Sure.
Is that not correct? And then
Yeah, the seller does not have to accept, even based on the listing
price.
agreement terms.
Yeah.
They do
Right, so
not-
I mean, I brought him, he or she, an offer that was acceptable, you know, from our contract,
Mhm.
but then they could go back and say, well, it's just not enough due diligence money.
Mhm. Yes.
So then I haven't brought him what he or she wanted. So I haven't fulfilled my duties. Is that correct?
Well, based on, there's no mention of due diligence in the listing agreement. Based on listing agreement terms, then it was met. So due diligence not being a part of the listing agreement. So due diligence is a part of the offer to purchase. It's kind of like a bonus, because remember, due diligence can be zero. Doesn't have to be any due diligence at all. So based on that, the terms were met based on purchase price and the additional financing terms.
Then but the offer to purchase sample is attached to our our listing agreement. And then there could be a question, you know, yeah, I'm fine with 255, but I want 20,000 in due diligence. And then I'll move forward, and then you burn your commission, you know, if we get to the closing table. I mean, I'm just seeing it on the other end that there's a segment that's missing there, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see the point that you're making there, Melissa, is that, and this is the case really in any scenario, there's always going to be some gray area, an area where people will try to wiggle out of it. The rules are in place for the broad majority and generalities. If you get down to potato with your client, then that's where an attorney might need to be brought in to address the issue if they are really being unreasonable about paying your compensation or accepting or negotiating the offer. And so, you know, and that's addressed also in the listing agreement that, you know, if there is counsel that needs to be brought in, how that will be addressed and who's paying for it. Because it does happen sometimes that you may need to go to that level with a potential client or with a actual client. All right. And I did want to circle back. So Chris, part of your question that you asked was, what does it mean? Does it have to terminate the listing agreement in a scenario like that one? Well, that depends on the seller's response. So Teresa gave the example that seller in that particular case piped down a bit. But if there is a seller who's adamant that they have changed their mind, they're not going to sell anywhere close to what you agreed per the listing agreement, and you make that compensation demand, if the seller wants to terminate, then that might be the way that it would have to go, with, of course, that understanding that the compensation is now due and payable. So it depends on how the seller responds once you bring that up. But it's important to note that you guys need to have these conversations early, ahead of time, at the time of the listing agreement, not when the offer comes. This should not be the first time the seller's hearing this, even though they signed, because we all know they do not read what they sign. And so it's our duty to make sure to bring understanding on important and key points like that.
I had one not long ago where 3 days before closing, the seller stepped up and said, I do not want to sell my house anymore. All the furniture had already been packed up. The seller had already packed up all the furniture. The professional movers had done everything. The house was shined, cleaned, and ready to go. And they turned around and said, we do not want to sell our home. And they tried to play the COVID card on it. They tried everything. And what I did was I brought an attorney into my office, and we had a conversation And it was actually multiple clients that were involved in this because it was a relocation of a company. And something happened with their relocation of their company last minute, and they were trying to kill 2 deals 3 days before closing.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. So that's
what
very
ended up-
complicated.
Yeah, I'm curious. What ended up happening, Melissa? Did they go
The
through?
attorney just said that, due to this breach, you could get sued,
Mhm.
And it's not forfeiting, commissions and all of that. I mean, you could get sued because of these people have, wholeheartedly made the commitment to move in. And I mean, their truck was like in transit for the move. I mean, it was just like so close to the end.
Right.
And so, after she slept on it overnight, and having conversations from an owner of a company and then an employee of the company separately, because it was 2 separate transactions, they decided to move forward. And, there was some anger and frustration and stuff. And then I was co-broking with a Keller Williams agent on the other side of one of these transactions. So, I mean, it was real crazy. But anyway, the long and the short of it is, when something gets to that level, you really need to have an attorney to sit there and say, I'll be glad to represent you, but this is what you're going to be facing.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that experience with us. And there are many times where we get questions in contracts and even in just agency. We do get a lot of questions about how do you address it, or what should I say once you have pointed out the terms of the agreement that they have agreed to. Any further advice when it comes to legal advice needs to be handled by an attorney. You all are not attorneys, you're agents. You are to help guide them along, point them in the right direction, explain the terms to them. But once you get beyond explanation, if it goes into legal and advising, that's when you need to have an attorney to come in and get involved in that situation. So thank you again, Melissa. That was a great example to share with us. All right. Any other questions for us?
I was looking in the chat. Stacy said, to me, it's considered overtime. And I was just curious at none of us like to work for free, do we? So I was just questioning, did she mean overtime concerning compensation? And I think that's probably what she meant.
I mean, overtime, it's, let's say we renegotiate the contract and they say they want to go, let's say I'm going to play along with what they're trying to go along with. And so they want to go up to 300,000. Well, we can do that, but we need to renegotiate this contract. And in doing so, renegotiating this contract, we need to renegotiate the compensation, because I've already given you what was required in the first contract. So therefore, we can go forward with what your request is, but I'm going to need more compensation to keep going on with this process. Or we can end it at this juncture here, or we can move forward, but I'm going to have to increase my compensation going forward.
Stacey said, I want more money.
Yeah. So
You're making me work harder.
If you're trying to change the terms, so am I, right?
So am I.
Exactly.
Okay.
We can play this game.
Is that doable?
Stacey, I like how you think. Well, it's negotiable, right?
Now, I don't know if it's advisable, but
Right.
it is negotiable. Yeah, so I'm
thinking 8% here.
It depends on whether or not the sellers their change is a reasonable expectation. That's a big part of it too. They might want more for the property, but are they going to get it? Even in this market, like how reasonable is their desire for their new pricing? And so there's a lot of factors that you would want to consider before you begin that renegotiation, as opposed to having the fact that you have earned your compensation per your contract already, so it really requires a lot of thought into just that whole thing. And do you want to continue? What if they pull it again? They get that offer and they want to go higher? So do you want to continue with that client is another consideration as well.
And thank you for saying that, Tiffany. And the thing is, there are so many ways any one situation could turn out. End of the day is we probably, encounter things like this or seemingly unreasonable clients, but how many of us have really just said, okay, in this particular situation, okay, so what you're saying is you want to increase the list price. Well, let's go back and change this listing agreement. Let's get it changed in MLS and we keep moving forward. Because the whole point and our job is to get the house sold and to make sure, as was mentioned, that we're following our clients' lawful instructions, as well as, we want to keep things as calm as possible. So, I know we're saying all what could happen and legally and asking for commission, we've earned it. I'd probably say, well, I've earned the commission because you've been presented an offer. However, if you'd really like to, up the price, then maybe we need to consider or taking a look at the listing agreement, changing the list price there and change it in MLS. Because, I know we're saying all these things, but
yeah,
we're agents.
A lot of factors to consider.
Exactly.
And is that request reasonable? You
Right.
all should have done a CMA and you should have priced it well.
Mhm.
And so, all these things to think about and consider
Right.
before you make a move there.
Well, I know one comment that you made was if they made a discriminatory comment, that would be automatic cancel of listing in my book.
Mhm.
Just
Yeah.
that plain and simple, because I will not tolerate that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mike, for sharing that. And that should be the case for everyone because it's illegal for you to be involved. And if you participate in a transaction once a discriminatory statement or something like that has been made, then your license is now on the line. And so thank you for reiterating that. That should definitely be the case. There's just no tolerance, no tolerance. The firm is not willing to take on that liability, and you shouldn't be as an agent as well.
So in that case, you would still then seek your compensation, right, Mike?
I would definitely seek for the compensation
And then just terminate the contract.
and terminate.
Okay.
Again, making sure that you covered in advance, and they're very well aware that you cannot discriminate as a real estate broker. So making sure that that is covered and, in that process.
Mhm.
Well, it's in bold print for a reason.
In all caps, right, Mike?
All caps and
So
bold.
they're screaming it at us.
Yeah, exactly. So I make
Remember-
sure if I don't cover anything else, I do cover that. But I cover everything. So
Yeah.
most of it.
Lorraine?
I'm glad you said most. Yeah.
If they're moving out of their house, if they're trying to sell their house, they've got to go somewhere. So if you can think about them being on the other side and being treated that way, you want 300,000 after you listed your house for 255, but are you willing to be treated that way when you are looking to buy because you can't sell and live in the house at the same time?
Lorraine, that's
Love it.
wonderful.
It works two ways.
Two-way street. I love it. Yes. Good point. Excellent point.
Very nice. Yes.
Excellent point. Excellent point. Any other final comments or questions?
Well, you guys have been great. Thank you again, just for always having, good conversations. We have some really exciting topics coming for you guys that we've planned for the next. So make sure you're here next week. You want to be here for that one. But this is a really great opportunity to bring questions, to talk through scenarios. And so let some other agents know about this opportunity that we have as we're getting the word out here. To come and ask questions. And Amandalyn asked, is it recorded? It is recorded. And so if you did want to revisit or hear it again, please let us know. We can get that recording to you. So just make sure that you are aware of that. I don't think that we are posting the videos or links anywhere, at least not yet.
Not yet.
But we have the access and the ability to get the recordings for those who request it.
Yes, we do. Wonderful. Thank you all so much for joining us and participating. I really enjoy it. We talk about some really good things. And next week, you don't want to miss next week.
You want to be there.
We
Tell
will do
everybody.
some research. We're going to talk about some things. All right. So see you all next Thursday. And don't forget, we are so happy and glad that you asked. See you next Thursday, folks.
Thank you.
Bye,
everybody. Thanks.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Cynthia. Okay. I want to make sure that I get everybody that's here to send it out. Hey, Tiffany, one thing I think we can do is just send the recording out in an email to just the office. That way everybody can get it.
So that would be a quick, easy way, because it doesn't the recording include the instructions on how to access it or something like that?
I believe so. I guess I have to ask Jen.
Can you do that through BrokerKit maybe? Or
I can send it out through BrokerKit, definitely.
Yeah.
So I think if we just do that and
I like it.
available to everybody.
Let's just do that, because these are topics that everybody really should hear.
Right.
These discussions and can be very helpful.
Okay. Yeah, let's remind me to do that.
Okay.
I need to ask Jen about because it's since it's the office Zoom, I'll just need to get it from her.
Okay.
Actual recording.
Yeah, that sounds like a plan.
Okay.
Well, that was a good discussion, and I am excited about next week. I think we should definitely talk about the agent buyer desperation thing.
Yes.
Normal market, as well as what we already talked about too.
Right. Exactly.
Yay, it's gonna be great.
I think that'll be good.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. That sounds good to me. Okie dokie.
Have a fantabulous day.
You too.
Thanks.
See you soon.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.